According to new polling, Hillary Clinton's lead over Bernie Sanders has shrunk once again within the single digits. Now, this is from an NBC News Wall Street Journal poll released yesterday. It found Clinton with 42% support nationally, and Bernie Sanders, well, his support shot up to 35% nationally. That puts him within 7 points of Hillary Clinton nationally. Now, that's really kind of amazing. Now, another thing in this poll is that if Vice President Joe Biden does not run, according to pollsters, Clinton's lead over Sanders rises to 15 points. Now, according to the survey, Biden, if he were to enter the race, he's currently sitting at 17% support. Now, you add him into it, as I said, if he jumps into the race, he takes a lot of support from Hillary Clinton. That's kind of important. As I said, Biden's support comes from Clinton supporters primarily, which means that, well, as I said, if Biden jumps into the race, or I should say if Biden doesn't jump into the race, Bernie Sanders doesn't really change his support all that much, but it does change Hillary's support. Hillary's lead grows larger if Biden does not enter the race. Surprisingly, I had a hard time getting through that. Okay. Now, that obvious question is, will Joe Biden run? Now, he's still thinking about it, still considering it. A lot of people are speculating. I don't know. What I do know is, let's get into some numbers. Now, Bernie Sanders has shot up, as I said, in this poll over the last few months. Actually, Hillary Clinton had held a 34-point lead over Bernie Sanders back in July. And in June, it was even worse, 60-point lead over Bernie Sanders. Now, there are other polls that show that Bernie Sanders continues to rise in the polls. According to a New Hampshire primary CNN WMUR poll, Bernie Sanders now has a double-digit lead in New Hampshire with 46% of likely Democratic voters voting for Bernie Sanders. Momentous support. Continuing the momentum well past the summer. Is no longer the summer of Sanders. Now it's the September of Sanders. Now, Clinton, of course, comes in second in the same poll with 30% and 14% would support Vice President Joe Biden. Now, in Iowa, Bernie Sanders trails by just 5 points. And this is according to an average poll done by Real Clear Politics. Now, what are the implications of this? Well, this shows, when you look at the 60-point lead that Hillary Clinton had in June, and it's been eroded to about 7%, it shows that Hillary Clinton has lost a ton of support as Sanders continues to get more name recognition, get his name out there, get his policies out there. As people get to know Bernie Sanders, people like what they see. And part of what they like to see about him is his consistency. He's been very consistent on a lot of issues throughout his entire career. I remember reading an article where he had written about the same-sex rights, the right to same-sex marriage back in the 1970s. That is far, far ahead of his time. And he's, of course, been talking about economic inequality for probably just as long. Now, all of this stuff has, of course, caused Hillary Clinton to tack to the left on some of these issues. For example, recently coming out against Keystone XL Pipeline, recently coming out for affordable college, raising the minimum wage, etc., etc. Now, the TPP is sort of interesting. Now, Hillary was originally for the Trans-Pacific Partnership. She helped work out the deals when she was in the State Department. However, back when she was a senator, and even before, she had actually opposed NAFTA and CAFTA, and had actually voted against fast-track authority for President Obama. And now, interestingly enough, she no longer supports TPP. She's backtracked on that. So, traditionally, she wasn't for free trade. I guess her record is sort of back and forth. But voting-wise, she actually has been against some of the free trade deals, even the deals that her husband pushed for. So that's very interesting on this. So I don't really know what to make about that. It's sort of like flip-flop. That sort of goes into the trust factor, I guess. Now, as for Biden, now this is the interesting thing. A Biden entry, as I said, would take Hillary's support. Now, that would provide an alternative if Hillary Clinton were to somehow drop out. Now, I'm not saying that that'll happen. I'm saying that that's a possibility. If she does, and if Biden decides to jump in the race, he could get Hillary Clinton's support. That's all I'm saying. And there's a reason that Bernie Sanders and on the Republican side, people like Donald Trump are getting a lot of traction is because there's a lot of dissatisfaction around the nation in the establishment politics. For example, on the Republican side, it's more clear with the entries of Donald Trump, Ben Carson, and of course Carly Fiorina. Those Republicans, they're in the top 3 spots on the Republican primary. Now, Ben Carson is a former neurosurgeon. He's never served in office before. He's never run an election. He doesn't have any experience, right? Carly Fiorina, also never served in Congress, never held a political office. She ran for Senate and had the famous demon sheep ad. But nonetheless, she doesn't have any practical experience governing or being a senator. And not to mention, she's a failed CEO. She drove Hewlett-Packard into the fucking ground. So much for experience, right? And then we go to Trump. Well, Trump's a reality TV host. He literally is a celebrity candidate. Now, Trump, some interesting things about Trump is that he has taken advantage of bankruptcy laws. For example, he went bankrupt 4 times. And he's like, yeah, I took advantage of those laws. They're there. And that sort of points out how ridiculous and absurd some of these laws are. Now, he also points out problem with campaign finance. He goes after lobbyists, which is great, because most Americans feel that lobbyists and money has too big of an impact on elections. And another thing that Trump does that it makes him popular on the Republican side is that he self-finances, so he can tell the billionaires to fuck off. That's kind of, people like that. That's why he's running sort of a semi-populist campaign, and he's doing incredibly well. Now, on the Democratic side, Bernie Sanders, he does have experience. He's been in Congress for decades. But even though he's been there for a long time, he's not part of the establishment. Now, he's independent, of course, independent from Vermont, has very liberal policies in a very conservative area. He's able to reach across party lines. And of course, one of the criticisms on that is that he has gotten help from the NRA for, his sort of lax position, at least when it comes to Vermont on guns. I know a lot of liberals have issue with that. I'm not a one-issue person, so I'm willing to overlook that. Some people aren't. I understand that. But I think his economic policy and racial justice platform, things like that, that's going to do a lot more than somebody else who says gun control. Well, yeah, you can't win on one issue. That's one of the problems we have with Larry Lessig's campaigns. The one issue. You can't just run as a one issue candidate and expect to win. It doesn't work. You have to appeal to a broad range of different issues. But that's just my problem with that. Now, Bernie Sanders, of course, caucuses with Democrats and mostly agrees with Democratic positions, but he also isn't afraid to criticize party leaders and criticize party positions to try to bring them more in line with progressive policies. Now, he's also urged Democrats to take up issues that he's been in favor of for decades. So I think that really kind of sets him apart. Now, of course, my final thought on this one, when it comes to this poll, when it comes to Bernie Sanders, is that this political atmosphere, this election cycle, actually provides a very, very unique opportunity for real change. When you have outsider candidates, that are on the, as I said, they're on the outside, they're outsider candidates, pushing against the establishment, pushing against both Republicans and Democrats, the status quo. Well, that provides, as I said, a real opportunity to elect someone who will actually try to bring you real change.